So welcome everybody, it's lovely to see you here this morning. Today, in the next of our series of Radley Then and Now virtual archives events, we're focusing on the archive material from the Don's play over the last 100 years. This is ahead of us celebrating the centenary of drama of Radley College next year in 2024. Today, we're going to travel back in time to 1923 when the first Don's play established the Radley Institution, and so began 100 years of truly bad puns and jolly, dodgy costumes. Now, before I move on to introduce you to our speakers, just a few housekeeping items. Please just keep your microphones on mute throughout so that we don't have a lot of noise issues. We do want this to be an interactive session, so you can either put a question onto the chat or you can just hold up your hand, and when we spot you, then we'll invite you to speak. Please just note that this event is recorded and it will be used on our website so that people who couldn't attend today are able to watch it afterwards in the comfort of their own homes. So now I'm delighted to be able to introduce our speakers today. As usual, we have our wonderful archivist talking, Clare Sargent, and she will be joined by Hamish Aird, retired Radley Don, who has featured in many a Don's play in his 50 years at the college. We're also lucky enough to be joined by our head of drama, Victoria Buse, who is putting together the next Radley Don's play, which is due to happen on June the 18th, so one for your diaries. So Claire, without further ado, I'll hand over to you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this talk. It's one of the very strange things that although we're celebrating a centenary of drama next year, that is actually the official founding of the Radley College Amateur Dramatic Society, which was Oyster Boyd and Charles Rynch working together to set that up. Actually, the Don's plays officially started the year before. So 1923 is the first time that we actually see a Don's play in Radley. Before then, of course, there was an awful lot of parlor entertainment, boys on stage, Dons on stage, mixing it up with musicians, and everybody taking part in very much that Victorian music hall entertainment style that was done. And there are one or two bits of the Radley history there for early drama, which we now keep quietly suppressed and don't put photographs up of because of what it includes. But in 1923, we get the first moment where at an All Saints Old Radleyan Day, there we are on the 1st of November, All Saints Day, we have just the Dons performing something for the pupils. And this is a complete reversal in roles, and it's what we're going to be looking at and seeing all the way through. This idea that your teachers aren't taking part alongside pupils, but they're actually just standing there on stage, performing, showing what they can do to the boys for the entertainment of Old Radleyans coming back. And this was such a hit that for the next 40 years, from 1923 to 1963, there was something at the All Saints OR Day every single year, right the way through the Second World War, right the way through the Depression, through changing attitudes in the 50s and early 60s, and so on. So we're going to explore some of those. So Caroline, we want to move on the screen. So this is the kind of thing you were getting as program cover. This is printed by St. Peter's Press, and I've had one or two things in from people showing some of the work that they did as boys, printing material for the Don's plays, for RCADS, and actually for the marionettes. And we will, later in the year, do something about the marionettes as well, which I know a lot of you were involved in. So it's just absolutely plain. The same sort of logo that's used on the old Radley, on the Radleyan magazine, on the calendars, doesn't say anything except here we are, Radley College, we're going to do this. So we can carry on. By the 1930s, we're beginning to move into some very, very bad puns. So this word masterspiece tends to come up time and time again. Somebody want to say something? And we're using a little bit of French, Les Danses Amuse, vintage 1935. And you see, they've actually moved on to 2 days of performance, the first and the second. So it's becoming a really serious thing. If we move on again, and we're beginning to get now artwork. And one of the things that comes through from all of these programs is that they're really picking up typography, drawing, and so on of the time in the 1930s. So these things are absolutely of the minute, and they're actually giving us a history of productions just through the Don's plays. And again, and here we are. We're still using the French. And really, this is what you could call the slogan of the whole of a Don play, the Don's plays. This is Radley. This is what Radley does, this very strange event. Again, 2 days of it. So if we go on again, we get to Délices des Dons. And you kind of get this playfulness all the way through of what is happening with them. So we're coming up to the Second World War, and all of these programs are for individual sketches. So they will have had 2 or 3 people taking part in a 2 or 3 or 4 person sketch, few people doing a song, a dance, but the whole point is that it is only the Dons, and it is always adapted and topical. And Tor, this is the sort of thing that we're doing again, isn't it, this year?
Yes, we are. We've got a series of sketches, and they will vary from music to drama to comedy, but it's sort of little snippets of previous pieces that have been performed here. And also just some in line with the kind of skit approach that just has a bit of fun in it.
Lovely. So it's still it's still alive and kicking, and certainly in all the time that I've been here at Radley, one of the things that's been mentioned all the time is the Dons plays. The number of Dons who are new Dons who immediately get indoctrinated into the idea that there might be a Dons play, something is going to happen. So the boys don't necessarily remember it as much, because obviously within their 5 years, there might not now be a Dons play, but the Dons certainly have this as an idea. So let's move on again, Caroline. And this is the earliest set of photos that I've got, and it really establishes exactly what we're looking at. This was a group of photos that was sent from South Africa by the family of Theo Cocks, who was sub-warden and who was, I think, the sea social tutor. I have to check what Theo is doing.
Claire, I had to take to him a copy of the Don's play. I think it was Peter's Panto, right? Because I think it was just after that, and he was in a nursing home just down the road on the Thames, and he was so delighted to. It was one of Peter Way's ones, and he was so delighted to receive it. There he was in bed, and that was the last time I saw him listening to the Don's play. Theo, classicist.
Excellent, and here is Theo going back. We've already got an awful lot of cross-dressing which is going on. And one thing to remember all the time is that in terms of the staffing structure, of course, all of the Dons, all the way through up until about 1990, we don't have women Dons. We've got women who are matrons, we've got wives on site, but the people on stage are all and always the men. So they had an awful lot of cross-dressing, a lot of playing around, but this is the earliest. So yes, please do feel free to put questions on the chat, to come in if you remember anything about anybody who appears on screen and so on. So Caroline, let's move into the 1940s. What we end up with now from the 1940s onwards, and again, this is right at the height of the Second World War. These start. Eastbourne College are here, evacuated to this school, but still you've got this unifying action by Radley Dons. And what you have is a series of pantomimes. These are totally written by Theo Cocks, with all the music composed by Ceddie Borgnis, who's the presenter at the time. And Ceddie's family did donate to us all of the scores. So we've got all of the scores and we've got most of the scripts for these. And this is the whole series of Dick Whittington at Radley. So now what you're getting, instead of little sketches being done by a few people, is ensemble playing. Everybody in the staff who can possibly be involved in this is there on stage at any one time. And this caused us some problems when we were looking for the production that we want to do now, is that we said, I blithely said, well, I'll look through and see what we can find. You're back again, you'll pop it on. I'll look through and see what we can find by way of the scripts and something that we can actually perform as a piece of heritage drama. And actually the scripts obviously are full of topical jokes of their own period, but they also include vastly larger cast for each piece than we actually had. So we're doing things with 2, 3, 4 people. And so we couldn't actually reproduce anything. But you end up with all sorts of really bad puns on this. So the Dick Whittington at Radley series of pantomimes, which will be really, really remembered by anybody who was there at that time, with the music by Ceddie Borgnis. Okay, move on again. So this is 1945. This is part of the victory celebration based around the coal strikes. So it's a political play, but it's also very much a parody, a drama, a satire. And it's using Radley. You can see the backgrounds there. We've got hands going up, Angie. Okay. You see the backgrounds there just based on the portraits in Hall. These were very much done by Chris Ellis at this period. And later on, Charlie Bussett was taking part in making sure that the scenery was right. And you can see again, people in all sorts of costumes, dons in Radley rugby kit, in cricket kit, dressed as the nurse, the matron, very fine ladies there in furs, flowers, all of those things which are happening. So we're getting a little bit of political input as well. So we move on again. And here we are, we've got the Folie de la Victoire still happening, and on, Radley on, let's keep going on with this. So we move on to the 1950s. And now we're beginning to get the sort of thing that people might well remember, and far more jokes. Things like Full Moon, the thrilling, up to the minute, interplanetary atomic adventures, and the Fool supporting program for All Saints Day, 1953. We've been looking, obviously, at the moment about what did we do to celebrate the coronation, and actually it didn't feature, which is really weird. But what does feature is the beginnings of the space race and the beginnings of, we've got atomic things going on and so on, and Don's Dare. And we had a quotation came through from Michael Bortrey, who was talking about the mysterious place, which I'm sure some of you will remember. I think possibly Charles Rich, I'm not sure who is saying this, or Oyster Boyd, that he is off to Imazaz. And it was apparently a problem for all sorts of boys of Radley for years, working out where Imazaz is. He's going to go to see Imazaz. Any clues? Any ideas? No? Everybody? It is him who has, him as has done something, him as has is my husband, that sort of thing. But it became a joke in the 1950s of who is him as has. So we're moving into really things to do with the what's going on in the rest of the world. So we move on again. Starting again to get this typography that's going on, the style of it. People like Christopher Ellis again putting in descriptions, and again, and something which is completely of the 50s. Yeah. I think you've got, is one of those Jane Russell being presented. How handsome are the dons of Radley, you have to say. All of them with their cane and their mortarboard and their gown. But really an image which is straight out of the 1950s. And what I want to know is how much this actually represents the school, whether this is purely fantasy or whether there is a sort of sense that they saw themselves as completely with it, very stylish, young, handsome, and so on.
Claire, it looks like a gents advert for suiting.
It really does. It really does. I love the I love the little canes just casually held, which is really quite something. And as I say, is that Jane Russell? Who is the woman in the middle? Certainly some major film star, I think.
I love the wet rot too. It's a bit of a surprise under the top bit.
I'm presuming that it's actually a pun on wet bobs. And that's why it's called wet rot, I assume. But there are so many in-jokes that trying to actually unravel them, you could, if you went through all of the scripts, you could create an entire study of the subculture of the school. But again, how much it's real, I don't know. So let's move on.
Hugh, did you have a question? If you come off mute.
Hello, Hugh. Did you have a question there?
No, we can't hear you. Rod on. Surely these are wonderfully topical.
Can you hear me? I've unmuted.
No, we can hear you now, Hugh.
All right, very good. Just to tell you that during that last picture, the figure in the white-haired man on top right is obviously Warden Milligan. I recognize him. And just another point on one of your previous comments, Ceddie Borgnis was not presenter but succenter. He had a wonderful long name. Cedric Hammonds Cheney Borgnis, triple-barreled name.
A triple-barreled name, yes.
He never became presenter. He was disappointed when Dusek left in about 1952 not to be appointed presenter. But of course, Anthony Caesar, A.D. Caesar, took over in 1952, I think it was. That's it, over from me.
No, well, that's picking up a few points there. Ceddie Borgnis was actually an old Radleyan as well.
Yes.
So yes, he wasn't presenter, he was succenter. But what we're getting here is that by the 1950s, once Anthony Caesar came in, he's writing the music again for these plays. And they're now being done by Rawlinson as well. So we've got Alan Rawlinson writing scripts. We've got Anthony Caesar, and there is one other name.
Charles Wrench, perhaps?
No, I think Charles had gone by this point. Let me just check.
I do that, Claire. There's a note from Rod. Surely these are wonderfully topical parodies of Eagle's Damn Dare and Brian Ricks's hit Dry Rot.
Yes, very much so.
Hello,
So-
Claire.
Yeah.
It's Zoe Sanders.
Yes, hello.
I'm Ceddie Borgnis' daughter.
Oh, hello.
Good.
I have found in a box 2 recordings of the songs of
Oh,
the
excellent.
Dons plays. I'm not entirely sure which plays they come from, but I would be very happy to send them to you. Of course, they are old vinyl LPs, but I know you can get them recorded onto disc. But I'd be delighted to send them to you.
That would be absolutely fabulous because we don't have any of the recordings in the school.
Okay.
So that would be a real addition. Would you be happy also when I've had them digitized, you'll add them to the website?
Absolutely.
And then we can add that as part of our audio collection.
I have a feeling, I think I have heard them, but I think there's much giggling that goes on.
Yes.
Do I send them to you, Claire?
Yes, send them to me.
Yeah, okay.
That would be brilliant. Right, and Brian Ricks, yes, Rod, that's a very good call. Dry Rot coming through there. And yeah, they are. Can we go back? Go back. Don's Dare, yes, Eagle's Dare, all of those things, picking up all of those points which are there. Milligan must be the first year that Milligan was warden, 55. So he's gone straight into being parodied on the Don's play there. Okay, so let's move on a little. And this was something that we commented on the other day when we were looking at it, this whole word of dig dem dons. And as I was driving in this morning, there was a really interesting discussion on the radio about phrases like dig dem. And the next one, which will come up, which is beatniks, and the 1960s use of this sort of language. So still very interesting topical work going on. So as we move into the 1960s, we're beginning to work with Peter Way here, who obviously he'd heard these when he was a boy at school in the 1930s, took them on in the 1960s as something to really keep up. And you were talking, Hamish, the other day about Peter Way's professionalism. Can we just move the slide on, Caroline? Yep, not cricket, 2 under the 8. We've got people like Ivor Gilliatt taking part in stuff just before this as well. And the next one. And the beatniks in England present. So we're really sort of touching on things like beat culture coming in from America. So it's very erudite if you actually think about it, but it's also very much of its time. Hamish, you were talking about Peter Way's production standards.
Well, I think they were very high indeed, and his handling of common room was particularly good. I'm not sure that everything that we acted in would be very good on diversity these days, or hugely woke either. So I don't know whether one has to be careful talking about these things, but the standard was very high, and that was because of his abilities and his nature, and of course his love of the whole past of Don's plays, the Don's plays that he'd been involved in before. But he was a very decent artist. He was a poet, and he was a good writer and a very good teacher, of course. And as a tutor, he had at the period when he took over producing, which I think was 69. Does that sound right, Claire? Peter taking over.
That's the first one for Peter Pan.
Well, then at that time there was Sandy Nairn, Andrew Motion, John Brigcutt, Phil Ryland, who runs the Guggenheim in Venice, Mike Richards, the Cancers, they were all in his social. So there was a huge amount of talent in A social. But as a producer and director, he was also very aware of how busy everyone was. Dennis Silk had just arrived, and so we were all working like anything. But he always made sure that the whole play was recorded in chunks, in bits that involved you as a character in as few rehearsals as possible. So instead of everyone being called on to play, very rarely you had the whole cast. It was done in sections. And so you'd probably be rehearsing individually. You'd be rehearsing perhaps twice, maybe 3 times a week at the most.
That's lovely. So shall we move on, Caroline? We should end up with
hand raised here. Who wanted to speak? Oh yeah.
Jonathan Cardell, can you see me?
Yep.
I remember being Goneril in King Lear, which Peter Way produced in 62, it would have been, because I left in 63, joined the Navy. So he must have been producing before 68, 69, or did he not take over the Don's plays till then? But I certainly remember, I'd second what Hamish says about his professionalism as a producer, because the production of King Lear, which he did, was, I think, very high standard.
Yes, the Don's plays, it's 69, but he was certainly involved with RCADS, which you would have been doing King Lear with, right the way back into from when he first came as a Don in the 1950s.
There are no Don's plays between 63 and 69, were there?
No.
There was
a
5-year gap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And it's Peter who really revived them and said, okay, how do we do this? With King Lear, actually, one of the things that Peter gave me was that the Fool had a staff which was made by the marionettes, and Peter gave me that piece of prop, and it's actually the only existing marionette that we have. So it is King Lear's Fool's staff. If any of you have got Untold Stories, the book, there is a photograph of it, so you can actually still see it there. But one of the things we will discuss when we talk about drama next year is the Shakespeare, because actually some of the plays that they put on were incredibly not advanced, but what's the word? Ambitious for schoolboy productions. So both Boyd and Way doing and Rynch actually producing Shakespeare to the standard at which they produced it. So if we move on then, this is where we start a new career, a new story of the Don's plays, because yes, there was that complete hiatus. And one of the issues that towards the end of Milligan's time and Dennis Silk arriving in sort of across 68, 69, was that the school was getting much larger, or was going to get much larger. Common Room was still about 45 members or so. I think you said, Hamish, didn't you recently?
Yes. Yes.
So you've still got quite a small number of Dons who are actually available to take part in these plays. But you also had the increasing pressure of external exams. So you're starting to get things like A levels and O levels, whereas the 1950s up to about 1955, and certainly the 30s and 40s, what you had were certificates, school certificates, higher certificates, which not everybody was actually taking. But once you get the pressure of external exams and the whole school is involved in this, it actually cuts down a lot of what can be done across the school by way of things like the Dons plays. There are also complaints from the boys about not being able to maintain all of the societies that they were doing, and some of the minor sports were finding themselves really beleaguered. And it was becoming increasingly difficult to do those kind of extracurricular things that really add to the day and to life in a boarding school. And Peter Way, I think, was very conscious of this happening. And so here we have the first of his series of original scripts. He's got Donald Paine is writing the music for these, and Auntie Caesar had just been writing as well. So we've got Peter Panto. Now, Hamish, you had a starring role in Peter Panto. So if we move on, Caroline, here we are.
I'm glad I'm not in that one.
Are you not?
No, that's Goldie. I know I'm that shape now, but
are you sure? Surely you were Peter Pan.
I was Peter Pan, yes.
And is that not Peter Pan?
No, that's a new girl called Wendy Winson. At least I think it is. Perhaps it is me. I'm looking closer now. I think you're right.
It's Peter Pan.
I never thought it was me when I've looked through past Radley. I don't know whether to hide my face in shame or not.
So we had Wendy Winson as well. Now you had a story for me the other day about your entrance in this play.
Yes, Peter Pan appears at the window in the actual Peter Pan, and so I had to appear at a window. And in most productions, he's on a wire and flying. And so my first words as I peeped through the window to the surprise and shock of Simon Langdale and Richard Morgan. Simon Langdale was Michael Coverdrive, and Richard Morgan as John Player. Yes, you've got it, a fag. I had to jump from the window onto the top of a wardrobe, which was not too difficult. It was about a foot. But then there was a 3-foot leap onto a chest of drawers. And as I leapt, I had to shout, "Look, I can fly." So that was quite a good humorous moment for the audience. And I think Peter was very good at spotting those possibilities in the text. And look at, again, as Claire was saying just now, looking at the cast and looking at the number of people involved, I think virtually everyone in Common Room was involved. So there was, what was Tony Money doing? He was arranging the costumes. There were 3 or 4 people doing makeup. This is where wives came in too. And properties, Peggy Gardner and Tony Gardner was in charge of the audience, the prompting of the actors. And so there were those who weren't actually acting, and there was something like 25, 30 acting were involved in other areas. And the effect was, I'm not quite sure what the effect on the boys was. I think they enjoyed them. They never sent them up, really. They were waiting for what happened next, and that again is to do with the professionalism of how well they were done. But bringing Dons together, it was very successful in that, without any doubt at all. That it brought Common Room together as a group.
Is there anybody in the audience who remembers Peter Pan, or who would like to speak about the effect on boys?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can certainly remember.
Oh, it's Terry Blake.
I'm still not, yes, Terry Blake, sorry. I'm still not convinced that that's not Goldie, but I'm sure Hamish knows. I think I can spot Giles Ridley and Chris Butterworth. On the
Dave Fielding, I think. Yeah.
Is that
Oh,
Dave
Giles
Fielding?
Ridley, yes.
Is Dave Fielding to your left, Hamish?
In a kilt.
Oh, right. Yes, of course. Oh, my goodness.
I think David Flint next to him.
Oh,
Yeah.
my word. Yes. And then who's in the middle with doing the jazz hands?
Can't
spot him.
No, I can't either. Should do.
What?
I presume these are the Lost Boys.
Yeah, they are. Yes. So
Yeah.
Simon Claxton was somewhere. David Hardy. Might it be?
Yeah, it could be. Michael Claxton
wig.
might be with a moustache, perhaps. Don't know.
Yes.
Can I ask why, Hamish, do you remember why there was a hiatus for 5 years? Was it because you'd gone the beatnik route and Milligan didn't approve or something like that?
Well, that's what I was led to understand, yes. But I don't think it didn't seem to be talked about all that much. I think I'm not sure why or how it then came back in. I think primarily because Peter was very keen to get them going again.
Yes, I'm sure Dennis would have been.
Dennis too, actually. Yes, I think
Yeah.
he'd have been pro. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got some letters which Dennis sent to David Hardy after one of the ones that's going to come up now, where he's actually writing to David in character about what he did in the Don's play. So it's very clear that Dennis was completely behind them, although he never appeared in any of them. I'm talking about costumes. I'm really admiring the fact that sporran appears to be a painter's brush. Caroline, would you?
This was the Wild West one.
Yes, this is the Wild West one. This is where we're beginning to move into the kind of material where we have to think about what we're actually going to put up on social media. So Up the Totem Pole, this is 72. So this is 3 years further on, again by Peter Way, who doesn't put his name on the front of them, but they're beautifully produced programs. So let's have a look at Up the Totem Pole, Caroline. And there we are. Now, I think, again, let's do some identifying. Who is
I can recognize the person on the left. They didn't often have women in taking part in it, but I know that old woman.
And,
that's you.
But who is the glamorous one with the blonde curls?
Now that's not Goldie. That must be Fanny the Blue. That's David Hardy. Because she looks a bit sort of wild, doesn't she? It looks, not quite sure what the word is. And then there's another one over on the right.
Is that not Goldie?
That must be Goldie, yes.
Right. And then we've clearly got somebody who's starring as a horse. And we've got a what we would now call a Native American chief, an Indian chief.
Yes, well, there were a number of them.
Yep.
Chief Eagle Birdie was Peter Leroy. Could be.
Eagle Birdie. Right.
Yeah.
I don't recognize any of the others.
Okay, let's move on and see if we can find another. Now this
Jane
one you
Fielding
should
there, of
recognise.
course. That looks like that's in makeup, I think.
That's David Hardy again, isn't it? Oh no, it's Fielding.
David
That's
Fielding.
Fielding.
Yes.
I mean
I
David
think it's
Fielding.
Fielding.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a backstage shot. Yes, indeed. Pretty much. So this is David Fielding, who was in a great many of the plays. And again, David and Sue Fielding recently gave us a lot of papers from Geo Dave, both about teaching geology, but also play scripts and photographs and so on. So a lot of the stuff is out there. So something just popped up on chat. Yeah. Yes, those famous sideburns. Yes, they're not part of the costume, are they? They're actually
That's his.
They're his
They're
sideburns.
genuine. Yes, you could pull them, and he wouldn't be pleased.
I can imagine he wasn't pleased. Yes.
Have a long
next
shot.
one.
Long shot on the man behind. Could that be Richard Morgan, possibly?
I think it might be. Yes. Yes. That
Got the
could,
right
that
profile.
could well be.
Right.
He was top scalp slicing iron. An Indian. I told you were getting into difficult territory.
Can anyone remember the Festival of Britain play?
1953. That would be.
Yeah.
Does anybody?
No.
I remember
about
it's George Wall Morris. I remember Ivor Gilliatt singing in a most amazing falsetto. Great amusement.
Well, I think this is the astonishing thing about them is to stand up on stage and do something like that in front of boys that you teach and that you know. I'm just abandoning schoolmaster's dignity to sing in falsetto, just to have this fun time. So yes, we've got Ivor Gilliatt. Here we've got Dave Fielding. Caroline, turn on.
Scotty Burks, that is, and someone else.
It's Goldie again with Dougie.
No, it's me.
Oh, it's you again. Oh my goodness.
It's Goldie's aunt. Surely that's probably why you're mistaking it. Yes. I was his aunt in the Wild West one. He was Miss England, and I was Anne O-level. Anne O-level.
So how did Miss England come to have an Irish aunt?
What a very good question. I think that I think the pun or the play on words was too much for Peter. I don't think that question was asked. I didn't have to speak in an Irish accent anyway.
Right, so that's Scotty Burks.
That's a fine figure of a man, Dougie, really, quite handsome.
Yeah, he was, yes.
And these two, and you're reckoning that's David Hardy.
Gosh, that's. So what about Baxter Holly? The barman. He looks a bit barman-y, doesn't he? I think that's Baxter Holly, who came over from Australia. And,
yes, I think you're
just
right.
For a year. He was famous for knocking on the warden's door at Christmas and saying, can I come and teach next term? And common room was full, as it were, a bit like a boarding house. And he said, no, but come back in the summer term. So Baxter came back in the summer term, and it had been just after that he acted in this, and then he left at the end of the summer. He was only over for a year.
And we have
Holly. I still hear from him.
Right.
A great character, a proper Australian, but very fond of England too.
We had a question about George Savory, also.
Jeff Savory.
Jeff Savory.
Jeff
sorry.
Savory was the medicine man in this. But going back to Peter Panto, if I'm allowed to do that,
yep.
He was the matron. He was Miss Scissors, and he was violently in love with Neil Fisher, who was Mr. Snarling, the housemaster. And the whole play really didn't really revolve around Peter Pan. It revolved around these two, and Peter used every sort of comedy for that, and the songs were particularly good. I can remember Jeff Savory had to sing "Boys Are All I Have in Life, apart from Mr. Snarling. Hope something calls me snarling, darling. Call him snarling. Yeah, it was very funny, and they were good friends. They were both in the war heroes, I suppose. And Jeff spent his time in submarines, and I don't think it could explain why he was sometimes a bit short-tempered. I remember I was teaching in one of the classrooms opposite the mansion, and it was rather noisy. I wasn't very good at keeping order then, and he was teaching in the classroom above, and he came downstairs through the door back, where I was writing something for the boys, and they were all chattering away like anything. And so he couldn't see me because I was behind the door. And so he said, "What are you lot doing? Who's meant to be teaching you?" And all their eyes moved round towards me behind the door. And there was a slight silence. And then he said, "Oh, it's you, is it? I might have guessed," and went out slamming the door. Which it was very good for my morale. I'm sorry, that's irrelevant.
No, it says so
they
much.
were great as a couple, and really going back again, Peter, they were very important in that. And Jeff Savory, who just died last year, I think, aged 100, 6 months after his 100th birthday, and remained a great friend of Peter's. And Neil died some time ago, of course. Yeah.
Right. And I saw we had a question pop up. Who remembers Poppy from Popocatépetl, who popped the kettle on? Anybody else remember this character? There are so many puns and so on all the way through these. Caroline, we move on.
We do have a question from Jonathan.
Right.
He's got his hand up.
All right.
Okay, sorry, and it's another irrelevance, but I couldn't help remembering when Jeff Savory, in charge of the naval section at our annual inspection, we did a jack stay across College Pond. The naval section was the shambolic section of the CCF, and we lowered him gently into the College Pond, which lost a few marks for the inspecting officer.
Well worth it.
Right. So the next one by Peter Way was the Case of the Compromise Question Papers. He did a couple which are based around Sherlock Holmes. And I loved his quote, supposedly here, from 50 years at Radley. There were, however, other seeds of decay, more serious than illness. And boys who introduced a new and undesirable element. Actually, I do recall, if you actually read Singleton's diary, there are a couple of boys right in 1847 who introduced an undesirable element. They had come from Marlborough College, and they were returned to Marlborough College within a term because they were really not Radley material. So here we've got And again, you can see how it's expanding. We've now got 4 days of productions. This is a massive, great thing in the old gym to be producing that and committing that amount of time, evening after evening, to 4 days. I mean, this we can just about manage now for the school play. Is that the case, Tor?
Sorry, say that again, Claire.
I was saying 4 days is a lot of productions, a long time to be on stage.
It's only the musical now that goes on for 4 days.
Right. So the school play itself would be what, 3 performances?
Three performances, yeah.
So it's a huge commitment to actually take this on while you're teaching as well, and in October. So we've got Peter Way, we've got Donald Paine doing the music, and let's have a look at some of the photos from this one. Now, I think that's Goldsmith.
Chris Brown is Sherlock Holmes there in the Heart and Trues.
Yeah.
David Goldsmith, yes, of course, in the long white coat. And on the ground, I don't know.
Well, I think that's The Mysterious Case of the Dog in the Nighttime. And I think that's John Wiley.
Oh, right.
Who I think was always the dog in any
yes.
play that he was part of.
Yeah.
And Peter Stewart on the right. Peter Stewart on the right, is it, Hamish?
It's
you lot are all. Oh, is it Dave Fielding? It looks like Dave Fielding.
It is. I mean, look at the sideburns have grown.
It looks like Peter Stewart's nose, but then I'm.
Well, let's not overlook the possibility that Dons were all playing each other.
Yes.
But I realise this is very much set in Radley because, of course, it is the compromised question papers. So, I played Baskerville. Yes, he did. We'll come to that one as well. But what we also have here are some backstage photos. So we've got, we've talked about the wives taking part backstage. The matrons were backstage as well. And what's never really mentioned is the backstage crew of boys working with Jeff Traglown. And here they are. And somebody has written to us about being backstage. Now, I want to know how much this group was sworn to secrecy while they were listening to rehearsals. Was anybody there who was a backstage crew?
I was long gone. Paul Crowson's on the left being made up.
Yes, that is. He looked very young there, doesn't he?
He does. He does. Good
Cupid,
makeup then.
Cupid Stewart in the middle.
Right.
Yes, I think that's right. Yes, and that looks like Goldie at the top of the Paul Crayson one in the back. I know that Goldie look.
And Donald Paine next to Peter Way, of course, in the one with the boys.
Yeah.
Yes. Very much there.
I wrote later Simon Whitworth was one of the helpers back in the Peter Panto.
Mm. Yes, they are all named on the program, so we do have a full record of who's there. We're afraid we have had to say goodbye to Buse because she's teaching, but she did have a couple of questions. One of which was, what is your most memorable moment from a Don's play? And we'll come back to that, I think, from all of you. So you can all sit back and think, what was your most memorable moment? And we'll come back to that question. And so if we move on again. And this one I absolutely loved when I saw it, that we've actually got a Don performing as Clock Tower. So I'm presuming that this is a Peter Way production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So we've got a play within a play. So we've got the lantern, the bottom clock tower as the wall, and then a whole array of dons watching this play. But I thought it was a wonderful photo. Unfortunately, it's fairly damaged, so we have to clean it up at some stage.
Well, they're all recognizable. The ones on the right, there's Chris Brown, then there's Goldie, then there's Scotty Burks, then there's Jeff Savory, and then I'm not quite sure.
No, I
David
can't.
Hardy.
Richard Morgan is in the middle of the middle three, I think.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. And again,
Wonderful.
and this is where I came in. We had, after Peter Way left in 1989, drama again changed. And we had Jim Hare, who came to really to professionalize drama. So that was the end both of RCADS and of a number of productions. So 1990, we had, they went back to Bennett's 40 Years On, produced by Charles Hastings, yes. And then here we have Peter Pan, and again, we've got Charles Hastings. So we're beginning to see a couple of things here. First of all, you've got still the matrons in the background. The blonde wig is actually Peter Boyden, the assistant chaplain, as Tinkerbell. Beside him is Gary Wiseman, who many will remember as Wendy. He shared the role of Wendy with Davenport, who you see there on the bottom left, who went on to become a very distinguished headmaster. We've also got Andrew Reeks, who played Captain Hook with great aplomb, seemed to bring out a lot of his character. But we also have Janie Wright as the first time a woman appeared as a woman, actually on stage. And Janie is there as the princess, the Indian princess. So after 1995, what we have are sort of every few years a play, but they tended to be reviews or material that's well known, or short plays, things like Daisy Pulls It Off, The Best Years of Our Lives, that sort of thing. John Beasley produced a tribute to Peter Cook in 2016, which was the last Don's play that was done, which were a whole series of sketches by Peter Cook. And I think one of the things which has not really ever been explored, because Peter Cook was here in those early 1950s, while this sort of thing is going on and being written, is quite what an influence these Don's plays had on his own humor and sketches, because you can see echoes from what's going on in his work. So we move on.
Claire, there's one figure there was taking a photograph. I think I recognized him, and I think he was the boy's father, the one who's usually then becomes the dog.
Right.
So
that's you.
That's me.
I
think it is.
May I ask, please, whether the Peter Cook sketches are on video anywhere? I wonder.
They might have been videoed by Max Horsey's team. Yes, they might have been, because it was 2016. I know that The Happy State of Your Life was certainly filmed. I'm in that. I had 6 words. But a massive point. I had to make the most spectacular entrance. So we've got that. So I think that the Peter Cook one might have been filmed by Max, but I don't think I've seen it. But there may have been question about copyright material on whether or not we could actually film and use Peter Cook sketches. His estate are quite strong about what can be reproduced. So we can have a look at that and see. And I think we have the final one. And we're back here. So that really is the Don's plays. And we've got several questions that have come up. And that one from Tor, what was your most memorable moment? Can anybody remember anything particular, a moment that really struck you? I know I had a few years back, Ted Dexter sat on the steps here in Mansion, held my hand, and tried desperately to remember all the words to a song about a hamster. And I've gone through all of the scripts that we have, and I can't find anything that relates to hamsters. So goodness knows what he was remembering, but clearly it was a memory from him.
Well, when Ted Dexter was chairman of the England selectors, he didn't even sometimes know the names of the players he'd picked, or couldn't remember them properly. Dear Ted. I think for me, the abiding memory or even image was just seeing the Dons for the first time, being prepared to ham it up, dress it up. And I think it certainly brought us closer together as boys and Dons, for sure, just as it did for Dons and Dons. And, you know, laughing probably at Dougie Burke's dressed up as a woman, Goldie too, no doubt Hamish, and many others. So although I may only have seen about 3 or 4 Don's plays because of the hiatus, it was just a treat.
Excellent, thank you. Anthony.
Thank you, Claire. I totally agree with Terry on that point. I think I remember the 1963 play, and it felt very unnatural to be laughing not only with the Dons, but at the Dons. And I'm sure it brought us much closer. But I think my fondest memory is in more recent times, particularly John Beasley and David Edwards together on stage. Their partnership was absolutely magnificent. And Hamish, you set a wonderful tone when you were dressing up as those great lady characters. But I think John Beasley and David Edwards, if I remember, they did the same, and they were absolutely hilarious together. I remember them both very fondly.
Yes, I remember very much feeling that as a woman, there were very few women's parts, and all the best women's parts were taken by David Edwards or John Beasley, Jim Summerlee, I think, at one stage.
Yes.
So quite a few of them. Anybody else a memory that they have specifically of a Don's play?
I certainly have one memory, which I love very dearly, which was in the middle of the Don's plays when Mr. Wrench sang. And I still remember him as ours to this day. Everyone else remembers it. I can't sing it anymore, but I try.
I've got one too, if you want another one, Claire.
Yes.
It was in the Wild West one that Peter had us all sitting around a radio. I don't know whether the radio is slightly out of time, but anyway, there was a radio, and there was quite a long description of a race going on the radio. So in print, it was about half a page, a lot of words, in fact. And one or two of us, actually led by Neil Fisher, started chatting during it. We thought it was a bit boring, and we shouldn't really have this in it. I mean, really, what was the point of it? I don't think we'd really understood what it was doing. And anyway, at the end of the rehearsal, Peter would have us all down the front of the stage, and then he'd say, well, very, very good, everyone, you've done jolly well, just one or two little points. But this time he came down, there was a silence, and he said, gentlemen, that was the most self-indulgent performance I've ever seen, and went out, and that was it. So that's my moment I don't forget.
Thank you, Hamish. A real sign of his professionalism. You couldn't play around. Anybody else?
Quite. But how good we
else?
normally were, actually. How well behaved we normally were.
Right. Well, I think that Sophie Torrance has asked people, she'll be writing something for the Old Radleyan as well about the Dons plays. So if you have memories that you want to drop Sophie an email, we can pull those together. One of the things that we will be doing, thanks, Tim. One of the things we will be doing is doing some interviews with former Dons who've taken part in the plays, and there is an exhibition that's going to be in the theatre foyer for the rest of this term. So if you're popping by the school, let us know that you're coming, and we can take you over to the theatre foyer as a guest and to see photographs and programs and so on. So there's going to be a lot going on. Okay, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Claire. That was absolutely wonderful. I'd really like to extend my thanks to you, and also to Hamish, who again was absolutely brilliant, adding all his reminiscence and memories from the plays that he starred in and watched. So thank you, Hamish, and thank you, Claire. That was great. Just a quick one to say, our next Radley Then and Now Virtual Archives event will focus on the bicentenary of rugby. In 1823, William Webb Ellis picked up the ball and ran with it at rugby school. Rugby became Radley's official sport in 1914, but it could so easily have been Radley that is played instead of rugby. 12 good men and true instead of 15. Join us next term to find out more about puddings, bullies and squashes. Thank you so much for attending, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much.